working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila and Jakarta, Indonesia. Hello in December. Welcome back to the program. It's been a long time.
Thank you, Ms. Alma. Hello, good afternoon to all the televiewers. I'm December Paras, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region. On today's headlines.
Finance Secretary Benjamin Diokno said the Philippines is projected to record the highest economic growth rate in 2022 and next year among ASEAN plus 3 countries. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi paid a courtesy call of Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., extending to him the message of congratulations of Chinese President Xi Jinping. And Singapore has confirmed its first local case of monkeypox, according to the Ministry of Health. And later, Singapore hanged 2 drug traffickers in what campaigners condemned as a shameful and inhuman punishment, taking to 4 the number of executions in the city-state since March. First in our news, Finance Secretary Benjamin Diokno is optimistic about a double-digit growth for the domestic economy in the second quarter of this year, following the 8.3% expansion in the first 3 months this year. During a palace briefing, Diokno said the government expects full-year growth as measured by gross domestic product to be between 6.5 to 7.5%, which are conservative figures. Take a look.
We expect the economy to grow by 6.5 to 7.5 this year. Okay? In fact, this is going to be the highest, the consensus is this will be the highest growth rate among all ASEAN plus 3 countries this year and next year. Okay? That's the consensus. When I say ASEAN plus 3, that plus 3 means Japan, South Korea, and China, okay? So the Philippines is expected to have the highest growth rate for the next 2 years. And then it will be followed by a growth rate of 6.5 to 8% from year 2023 to year 2028. Now, we're not only concerned with growth per se, we're also concerned with reducing poverty. Okay? So our target is that by the end of President Marcos's term, poverty incidence will be down to single digit, 9%. Okay? If I remember right, it started at around 25% during the Duterte's first year in office. But we were almost down to around 18, 17%. Then the pandemic hit us. Okay? So that there's a slight backsliding. But our target under this framework is that poverty rate will be down to 9% by 2028. Our target on the national government deficit to GDP ratio will be 3% starting 2026, 27, 28. Okay? Now on the debt, national debt, and you keep harping on this, 60%, that's the target. It will be down to 60% by 2025. Okay? Right now it's around 63%. So it will be slowly tapering off to 60% by 2025. And that on the Build program, we are committed to spend some 5 to 6% of GDP for infrastructure.
Mr. Diokno also said for 2023 to 2028, the growth projections are between 6.5 to 8%, This year's growth figures cited by Diokno are lower than the 7 to 8% projection approved by the Interagency Development Budget Coordination Committee, or the DBCC, during its meeting last May 24. DBCC's approved 2023 to 2025 growth projection is between 6 to 7%. Meanwhile, Mr. Diokno also said the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas expects elevated inflation for the next few months, pushing the annual average inflation this year to 5%. The continued rise in global commodity prices and more pronounced second-round effects on domestic goods and services will trigger more price increases of local commodities ahead, according to the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, after inflation shot up above 6% in June. Let's listen in.
The uptick in the June 2022 inflation rate was contributed by the following: operation of personal transport equipment, meaning the use of cars, etc., electricity, gas, and other fuels, and meat and other parts of slaughtered land animals. Inflation in the Eurozone, which includes Germany, Italy, Spain, Italy, etc., stood at 8.6% in June, the highest in 11 years. And meanwhile, in the U.S., inflation rate reached a 40-year high of 8.6%. Rest assured, the recent acceleration of inflation will be arrested by the government through addressing constraints in the food, energy, and transportation and logistics sectors. So as I said, inflation is driven mainly by the elevated world price of oil. Okay? It affected the whole world. Okay? Now, the measure that we will do is we will continue the grant of the fuel subsidy to the affected parties, right? Like the drivers, the farmers, and the fisher folks. Okay? The other measure is that we will continue the importation of products which are in short supply, okay? As has been done before. And of course, we will try to improve the transportation and logistics sectors.
The 6.1% inflation rate reported by the PSA, saying we are not that high. But Mr. Diokno said Marcos was just misunderstood, noting that what the president had in mind was the full-year inflation figure of 4.4%. Again, let's listen in.
So let me begin by saying that the president's disbelief at the 6.1% June 2022 inflation rate figure was misunderstood. Okay? He was referring to it as a full year figure when in fact the year to date, meaning January to June, average inflation rate is actually 4.4%. Okay? So that's what he was in mind, okay? 4.4. The president was correct in saying that the current high inflation experience is global. Among our peers, Indonesia's overall inflation climbed to 4.4% in June from 3.6% in May. Meanwhile, Thailand's inflation rate increased to 7.7% in June from 7.1% in May. Inflation in the Eurozone, which includes Germany, Italy, Spain, Italy, etc., stood at 8.6% in June, the highest in 11 years. And meanwhile, in the U.S., inflation rate reached a 40-year high of 8.6%. Rest assured, the recent acceleration of inflation will be arrested by the government through addressing constraints in the food, energy, and transportation and logistics sectors.
Ako na yan, Kuya. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi meets with his counterpart, Philippine Foreign Secretary Enrique Manalo, for bilateral talks with both sides, acknowledging the security situation in the region has become more complex. Wang is on a five-nation swing in Southeast Asia in a bid to ramp up his diplomatic offensive to elevate the level of China's relationship as a comprehensive or strategic partner of ASEAN amid recent American overtures to reinvigorate ties in the region. Let's listen in.
There's no doubt that the security situation surrounding our countries and region has become more complex as political, economic, and social-cultural landscapes continually shift.
这是面对你刚才所说的这个充满不确定性和复杂性。
Given the current circumstances, in particular, as you have mentioned, the uncertain, unstable, and complex regional and international dynamics, it is even more important for China and the Philippines, as two close neighbors, to join hands and further enhance mutual trust, expand mutually beneficial cooperation.
In the morning, Manalo welcomed Wang Yi as his first guest since he assumed the post of Foreign Affairs Secretary last Friday. Before their bilateral meeting, the 3.86-kilometer Samal Island Davao City Connector project was launched. The project was finalized weeks before President Duterte stepped down from office last month. It involves RMB 2.34 billion, or approximately 17.39 billion loan to finance the construction of a two-way four-lane bridge connecting Davao City and the island garden city of Samal in Mindanao. Both ministries also witnessed the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, on providing financial services to promote cooperation between the stock exchanges of the Philippines and China.
Meanwhile, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi also paid a courtesy call on Philippine President Bongbong Marcos Jr., extending to him the message of congratulations of Chinese President Xi Jinping. China's top diplomat wore a barong Tagalog when he visited Malacanang for his courtesy call on the president. President Marcos said that they discussed several matters, including the commitment to maintain the strong relationship between the peoples between the two peoples in the coming years. He said, "I am grateful to Minister Wang Yi for extending the message of congratulations and support from President Xi Jinping," Marcos Jr. said in his Facebook post. He added, "We also discussed agriculture, infrastructure, energy, and the commitment to maintaining the strong relationship between the peoples in the coming years." In a separate statement, meanwhile, the Chinese embassy in Manila said that the visit of Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi to the country 6 days after President Marcos Jr. assumed office was significant. It said this indicated, quote, how China attaches importance to our country's bilateral relations, unquote. Mr. Wang said that they highly appreciated President Marcos' commitment to pursue a friendly policy towards China. Wang Yi just came from Myanmar and Thailand. He is expected to visit Malaysia and Indonesia after his stint in Manila. Now, before this, President Marcos had announced in a press briefing in Malacanang that he would work on developing and strengthening the country's relations with China, believing that the relations do not just involve matters related to the West Philippine Sea. Again, let's listen in.
To find ways to work to resolve the conflicts that we have. And one of the ways that I have consistently suggested is that we have our relationship not only on one dimension, yun lang West Philippine Sea. Let's add to that. Let's have the cultural exchanges, educational exchanges, even military, if that will be useful. But I think that the more we do of that, the more it will help resolve the issues. I will also mention that it's an important player, an important actor in all of this in the region, in terms of the regional geopolitics, will be ASEAN and even APEC, because they have an interest. They are stakeholders in this. So, and we have many proposals to them in the sense that, as I said, we would like for us to increase the scope. Wag lang yung West Philippines yung pinag-uusapan ng China at saka Pilipinas. Let's do other things too. And that way it will normalize our relationship.
Hi, sir. 0700, sir.
Now, Marcos has a tricky balancing act in boosting business ties with China while maintaining close relations with defense ally, the U.S., a former colonial power that still holds sway in the Philippines. Marcos has expressed intent to elevate ties with China, but has also vowed to stand firm against any threat it poses to Philippines' sovereign interests.
Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong has called on China to use its influence over Russia to end the war in Ukraine and to show restraint in its dealings with smaller countries in the region. In a major policy address hosted by the International Institute for Strategic Studies in Singapore, Senator Wong drew a parallel between China's broader conduct in Southeast Asia and its tacit support for Russia's invasion, using a recent quote from Singaporean Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong to call for Beijing to show restraint in the use of its swelling power. Let's take a look.
And it is especially important for countries that play leading roles in international fora and countries with influence on Russia to exert their influence to end this war. And this includes China as a great power, a permanent member of the Security Council with its No Limits partnership with Russia. Exerting such influence would do a great deal to build confidence in our own region. The current situation calls to mind a comment by a former Australian Prime Minister who you all know is deeply committed to the region. Paul Keating, many years ago, envisaged that as China steps up to a larger leadership role, it will at the same time need to be willing to accept and respect restraints on the way it uses its immense strength, because the acceptance of such restraints by great powers is the key to any successful and durable international order. More recently, your Prime Minister observed, to grow its international influence beyond military strength, China needs to wield this strength with restraint and legitimacy. And it is up to all of us to create the kind of region to which we aspire. A stable, peaceful, prosperous and secure region. It is up to all of us to work together, to assert our resolve, to uphold the rules and norms that have underpinned our growth and our stability and that have served the nations of the world, large and small. It is up to all of us to work towards a strategic equilibrium in the region. Again, ASEAN is at the centre of this imperative. Australia has the honour of being a comprehensive strategic partner of ASEAN, which places even greater responsibilities on us to contribute to this equilibrium. We are deepening our contribution and our cooperation under this partnership in areas of shared interest.
Southeast Asian nations have been uneasy about Australia's move to acquire nuclear-powered submarines under the AUKUS Pact with the United States and the United Kingdom, and are concerned that the Quad groups, which includes Australia, India, Japan, and the United States, might sideline ASEAN in the region. But Senator Wong moved to reassure Southeast Asian countries that the new arrangements could help the neighborhood, saying, "We see these regional powers as partners to help sustain and build the regional order we seek." Meanwhile, some Southeast Asian nations have been uneasy about Australia's move to acquire nuclear-powered submarines under the AUKUS Pact with the United States and the United Kingdom, and are concerned that the Quad group, which includes Australia, India, Japan, and the United States, might sideline ASEAN in the region. But Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong moved to reassure Southeast Asian countries that the new arrangements could help the neighborhood. Let's listen in.
We see the Quad as working alongside ASEAN and other regional architecture to strengthen our shared interests with the countries of Southeast Asia. And this is why the Prime Minister and I travelled to Tokyo to the Quad Leaders meeting right after our election. We know that coordinating closely with our ally, the United States, and Japan and India brings real benefits to the region. Benefits like COVID-19 vaccines, coordinated action on climate change, responding to infrastructure needs, and the sharing of enhanced and transparent data to improve maritime domain awareness across the Indo-Pacific. Guided by the principles of ASEAN's outlook on the Indo-Pacific, we see these regional powers as partners to help sustain and build the regional order we seek. An order framed by a strategic equilibrium where countries are not forced to choose, but can make their own sovereign choices, including about their alignments and their partnerships. So it also should not be remarkable that Australia would seek enhanced defence capability from our allies in the form of nuclear-powered submarines. I make this point, this is not a new capability in our region. There are other Indo-Pacific powers that already possess nuclear-powered submarines and have been operating them for decades, and in fact some of them have nuclear-armed submarines. I emphasise again that Australia's submarines will be nuclear-powered, not nuclear-armed, and we have no intention of acquiring such weapons. We also know that acquiring these submarines comes with a responsibility to strengthen the global non-proliferation regime. For Australia, ASEAN centrality does not mean ASEAN only, but it does mean that our ASEAN partners can count on Australia to understand and respect the interests of the countries of Southeast Asia.
The evacuation of desperate civilians from Slovyansk pressed on as Russian troops pushed towards the eastern Ukrainian city in their campaign to control the Donbas region. Slovyansk has been hit by heavy bombardment as Russian forces advance westwards on the 133rd day of their invasion. Take a look.
Хотите все, вот это допродаем и все, будем дома сидеть. Есть погреба, в погребе будем. А что делать? Потому что ехать некуда, мы там никому не нужны.
Есть такое, но я боюсь за супругу. У меня приемная дочь беременная, 6-й месяц, нужно уезжать. То есть, здесь, после того, что вчера произошло, они лупили по центру города. То есть, выезжать надо.
Хорошо, если надо.
Супругу отправляю, у меня все, у меня выхода больше нет. Я завтра пойду в военкомат.
AFP journalists saw rockets slammed into Slovyansk marketplace and surrounding streets, with firefighters scrambling to put out the blazes. Around a third of the market appeared to have been destroyed. Locals inspecting what was left among the charred ruins. The remaining part of the market was functioning with a trickle of shoppers buying fruit and vegetables. The eastern Donbas is mainly comprised of the Lugansk region, which Russian forces have almost entirely captured, and the Donetsk region to its southwest, the focus of Moscow's attack and the location of Slovyansk. The fall of Lysychansk and Lugansk on Sunday, a week after the Ukrainian army also retreated from the neighboring city of Severodonetsk, has freed up Russian troops.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will hold a rare meeting with China's foreign minister seeking to contain tensions, but will shun his Russian counterpart at a conference in Bali this week, officials said on Thursday. Blinken will arrive Thursday in the Indonesian resort island for talks of foreign ministers of the Group of 20, the club of major economies that still includes Russia, despite U.S.-led efforts to isolate Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine. The State Department said Blinken will meet for the first time since October with Chinese Foreign Ministers Wang Yi, one of a string of recent meetings between the world's two largest economic powers amid high tensions on issues including Taiwan. In contrast to the effort to stabilize relations with China, State Department spokesman Ned Price said that Blinken would not meet with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Blinken last saw Lavrov in January in Geneva, where the top U.S. diplomat warned Russia of massive consequences if it went ahead and invaded Ukraine. It did so on February 24. Blinken will travel from Bali to U.S. ally Thailand for a visit canceled last year after an outbreak of COVID in the U.S. delegation. Officials said Blinken would hold talks in Thailand on supporting steps to restore democracy in neighboring Myanmar, where the military last year toppled the civilian government.
And we'll take a short break, and December Paras and I will be back right after this. Stay tuned.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Si Yuwol, mukhang naka-move on na. Hindi na ako iiyak. Tinanong mo ako kung gusto kong sumama sa Italy. Payag akong sumama sa'yo. Buhay ka!
Papakasalan ko ang gusto ko.
Si Miss Yun ba? Ganon mo kagusto? Pwes mag-deal tayo. Ikaw ang maupo bilang chairman.
Ano?
Kaya lang, hayaan mo na si Hadjo na pakasalan si Miss Yun.
Ang apo ko, ang magiging hari ng kahariang itatayo ko. Maliwanag?
Ang apo niyo po, sir. Hindi, ang anak ko.
Ang magiging hari kahit anong mangyari.
Siya na ba ang bagong reyna? A Place in the Sun. Ngayong linggo.
Panalo tayo pag together. Walang talo pag together. Let's dance together. Sa Net 25.
And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We're still coming to you live from Manila and Jakarta, Indonesia with December Paras. Now, the World Health Organization said it will reconvene its monkeypox experts to decide if the worsening outbreak now constitutes a global health public emergency, the highest level of alert. The UN Health Agency's Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said he would hold a second meeting of the Emergency Committee on Monkeypox. Take a look.
On monkeypox, I continue to be concerned by the scale and spread of the virus. Across the world, there has now been more than 6,000 cases recorded in 58 countries. Testing remains a challenge, and it's highly probable that there are a significant number of cases not being picked up. Europe is the current epicenter of the outbreak, recording more than 80% of cases globally. In Africa, cases are appearing in countries not previously affected, and record numbers are being recorded in places which have previous experience with monkeypox. My teams are following the data closely. I plan to reconvene the emergency committee so they are updated on the current epidemiology and evolution of the outbreak and implementation of countermeasures. I will bring them together during the week of 18th July or sooner if needed.
Most monkeypox infections so far have been observed in men who have sex with men of young age and chiefly in urban areas, according to the WHO. The normal initial symptoms of monkeypox include a high fever, swollen lymph nodes, and a blistery chickenpox-like rash. Initial outbreak cases had no epidemiological links to areas that have historically reported monkeypox, suggesting that undetected transmission might have been going on for some time.
Meanwhile, in Singapore, they have confirmed its first local case of monkeypox, according to a statement from the Ministry of Health. According to the Reuters, the patient is a 45-year-old male Malaysian national who lives in the city-state, said the ministry late Wednesday. His infection is not linked to an imported case announced on June 21, it added. The man, who is in a stable condition, began showing symptoms from June 30 and tested positive for the virus on July 6 and is currently at the National Center for Infectious Diseases, according to the same statement. 3 close contacts have been identified so far, including 2 housemates and 1 social contact, and placed in quarantine for 21 days. The Ministry of Health says contact tracing is ongoing.
Meanwhile, the Director General of the UN World Health Organization has also called on drug manufacturer Pfizer to do more to ensure that its new COVID-19 oral antiviral medication is available quickly. This is to provide effective treatment to countries that may struggle to afford it. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus' appeal comes as confirmed COVID cases jumped nearly 30% in the past 2 weeks. Take a look.
Our organizations are still trying to finalize with Pfizer the appropriate terms and conditions for low and middle income countries. This is delaying access, and some countries may choose to wait for a generic version of the antiviral, probably available on early 2023, and this will cost lives. I call on Pfizer to work closely with health agencies and countries to ensure its new oral antiviral is available quickly and effectively. Third, especially if you are in a place where cases are on the rise, use tried and tested public health measures to mitigate risk. For example, if you are in a crowded place or inside and there is poor ventilation, put on a mask, and if you are sick and you can, stay home. Fourth,
the UN Health Agency has been working with the Global Fund and UN Children's Fund, or UNICEF, to help countries source antivirals when they become available. And these include allocations of molnupiravir, which 20 countries have secured, and the nirmatrelvir ritonavir, or Paxlovid, which 43 countries have expressed an interest in obtaining.
Meanwhile, back to the country, the Philippine Navy's offshore patrol vessel BRP Andres Bonifacio PS-17 is now ready to perform its territorial defense functions while assigned to the Puerto Princesa, Palawan Base Western Command, or WESCOM. She is ready to perform her territorial defense functions at WESCOM. PS-17 is indeed very mission capable, and I am confident that she will significantly strengthen our naval presence in the West Philippine Sea and secure our oil platforms, WESCOM Chief Vice Admiral Alberto Carlos said in a statement late Wednesday. He was aboard the ship when it passed by the Galloc oil field, which is located 60 kilometers northwest of Palawan. Galloc field is one of the Department of Energy Service contracts which is being secured by Westcom, as well as the Malampaya gas fields and the Nido and Matinloc oil platforms. Carlos was very satisfied with the performance of the vessel from Sangli Point in Cavite City to El Nido, Palawan. Westcom covers the Palawan area and the West Philippine Sea. The ship was undergoing repairs to its mission-critical pieces of machinery before its deployment. The BRP Andres Bonifacio is one of the 3 Del Pilar-class ships, which are the former U.S. Coast Guard Hamilton-class cutters that were converted into frigates. Other ships of the class are the BRP Gregorio del Pilar, or PS-15, and the BRP Ramon Alcaraz, PS-16. Carlos visited BRP Andres Bonifacio on July 4 and boarded the ship before the ship set course to Westcom area.
In today's other news, Singapore hanged 2 drug traffickers in what campaigners condemned as a shameful and inhuman punishment, taking to 4 the number of executions in the city-state since March. The latest executions come after the hanging of a mentally disabled man in April sparked widespread international outrage, with the European Union and the United Nations among those speaking out against it. Those executed Thursday were Kalwan Singh, a 32-year-old from neighboring Malaysia, and Singaporean Nora Sherry Goose, according to prominent rights campaigner Kirsten Han. Han told AFP that Kalwan's sister had been given his death certificate and that Nora Sherry's family had brought his remains to a mosque. Prison officials did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Amnesty International said Singapore's use of the death penalty was a blatant violation of human rights. Singapore has some of the world's toughest anti-drugs laws and insists that capital punishment remains an effective deterrent against trafficking despite growing pressure to abolish it.
The number of people affected by hunger globally rose to as many as 828 million in 2021, an increase of about 46 million since 2020 and 150 million since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. According to a United Nations report that provides fresh evidence that the world is moving further away from its goal of ending hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition in all its forms by 2030.
The main findings of the SOFI report this year are not as good as we would have liked. And the reason is simple. The SOFI is reporting up to 828 million people chronically undernourished, what we call our POU indicator, which means that we have increased in 150 million more people chronically undernourished with respect to the previous year. When we look at the trend and we look at 2030, which is the target of the SDGs, our projections are showing that we will have 670 million people chronically undernourished. It's exactly the same number that we have in 2015, when the SDGs were signed. The key drivers behind food insecurity are conflict, climate change, and slowdowns and downturns. COVID-19 especially affected the slowdowns and downturns because economies, especially of developing countries, were completely shocked negatively because of the COVID-19. In this context is when the war in Ukraine happens. And what this means is that the situation is exacerbated even more. Why? Because Ukraine and Russian Federation represent around 30% of the exports of cereals. And what we understand is that there won't be only one policy. There has to be a portfolio of policies, of actions that need to be taken to create the transformation of the agri-food systems that we need. We can repurpose subsidies, of course, to improve efficiencies, to make the incentives compatible to a better nature, and also to reduce emissions for the climate, and to reduce distortions. So if not in 2030, at least in 5 years from there, or 10, we can achieve the goal of zero hunger.
And we'll take a short break. December and I will be back right after this. Stay tuned.
With the new administration, we're very optimistic that water will be given due importance because water is life.
When you say ultimate Bohol experience, it's the service of Boholanos that will showcase our visitors. We want to portray that Bohol is a place to see and to enjoy experience-wise.
I welcome all the investors as long as they will observe the environmental programs, marine environmental protection.
Open for business is in Bohol, and Bohol is open for business.
Open for Business with Cesar Vallejos, Sunday, 9 p.m.
Papa! Papa! Mary!
Ililigtas ko siya! Kapag kailangan mamili, kaninong buhay ang unang ililigtas? Sino ang iyong uunahin?
Doktor, anong ibig niyo?
Si Minho, pamilya at prinsipyo, ang puhunan sa pag-asenso.
Kahit na umasenso siya, galing pa rin siya sa kahirapan at hindi na yun maalis sa pagkataon niya.
Si Airy, isang surgeon na magaling. Malayo pa ang maaaring marating.
Mapopromote na bilang head surgeon ng anak ko sa ospital. Mas deserve niya ang higit pa.
Hindi mo na kailangan si Minho.
Si Junseo, ang ambisyon, walang kinikilalang limitasyon.
Pakasalan mo ako.
At si Jiwoo, masagulero.
Ang lalakas ng loob niyo, tigil niyo yan!
Ito talagang itinuro ko sa anak ko. Na kapag may nakita kang ibang taong inaagrabyado, lumapit ka, tulungan siya. Kahit na mahirap ako, poprotektahan ko siya sa mga taong tulad niyo.
Kapag nalaman kong may ginawa kayo, ako mismo ang maniningil sa'yo. Tandaan mo yan.
Fatal Promise. Simula July 18, 8:30 p.m.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's stand together. Sa Net 25.
Mrs. Elsa, nasan ka?
Babala ba ito na malayo nang matupad ang mga plano ni Elsa?
Pwede bang pakiprint yung thesis ko? Okay na yan. Huwag kang magalala, ako bahala. Huwag na huwag mo iwawala, ah. Walang thesis, walang graduation, walang Elsa. I-save mo sa ibang USB ang thesis mo tapos ibigay mo sa akin. Ayaw ma-read nito eh. Uy, huwag mo sabihin sa akin, nag-iisang kopya lang yan.
Tara na, Esperanza.
O babala sa planong dalhin sa malayo si Esperanza?
Ay, nakakasawa na yung si Elsa. Hindi ba siya pwedeng sumaya sa piling natin?
Siyempre naman pwede. Pero hindi dito sa bansa.
Mi Esperanza.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's stand together. Sa Net 25.
And we're back. We're still coming to you live from Manila and Jakarta, Indonesia with December Paras. Now, Malaysia's central bank has raised rates by 25 basis points to 2.25% on Wednesday. This is the second rate hike this year. The ceiling and floor rates of the corridor of the overnight policy rate were correspondingly increased to 2.50% and 2% respectively. In a statement, Bank Negara Malaysia, or BNM, said it decided on the hike to further adjust the degree of monetary accommodation amid the positive growth prospects for the Malaysian economy. According to Channel News Asia, BNM, or Bank Negara Malaysia, said that economic activity in the country has continued to strengthen in recent months, with exports and retail spending indicators affirm the positive growth momentum supported by the transition to endemicity. It also said that the reopening of the global economy and the improvement in labor market conditions continue to support the recovery of economic activity, although these have been partly offset by the impact from rising cost pressures, the military conflict in Ukraine, and the strict COVID-19 containment measures in China.
First natural cultural policy launch in Papua New Guinea. Here's Echo Hortaleza Quinola, Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea.
Let's witness the first ever launching of the National Cultural Policy here at the APEC House, Port Moresby. A well-celebrated day beams with traditional songs and dances at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Building. Today, Papua New Guinea's Honorable Prime Minister James Marape launches the first ever National Cultural Policy 2022 to 2032. Prime Minister Marape says it is a portal for economic potential and cultural tourism. He says this will prepare the future of Papua New Guinea as it addresses issues close to the heart of the nation and the people. The policy is expected to serve as a roadmap to appropriate interventions and actions.
Our culture is something that can be converted into the benefit of our citizens and our children who will come after us, and I've entitled our conversation, See Culture Also from an Economic Perspective. That is where 90% of Papua New Guinea today is. When we talk about connecting the unconnected, that is where 90% of Papua New Guinea are at the moment. When we talk about economically empowering our people and finding ways for them to be better in their own society, what is the quickest, easiest, and earliest opportunity to give to our people? And something that we are born with into our society is our environment, is our culture, is our identity, is our agriculture, is our forests, is our biodiversity. This is something we already have in my government. People say, you can talk about all the big infrastructures you want to build. You can talk about everything else you want to do. But if our people are not part of the journey, then we are missing the mark. In the life of this plan, in the next 10 years, someone who's 10 years old today will be a 20-year-old adult in this or her country. And so, foundationally, the next 10 years is very, very important. Well done, congratulations.
Honorable James Marape congratulates Director Stephen Kilanda of the National Cultural Commission and his team, and to the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture, Honorable E.C. Henry Leonard, for a job he says was well done.
Now that we have a government that sees culture as an integral part of this country, through this policy, we need the continuity of this government.
The policy, if embraced, is expected to ensure protection, preservation, and safeguarding of culture and the arts. Echo Hortaleza Quinola, Oceania at a glance, Eagle News.
Thanks, Echo, and thank you for joining us here on the latest updates in the ASEAN region and beyond. And also, thank you very much, December Paras from our Jakarta, Indonesia Bureau.
Thank you very much, Alma, for having me. And that's latest news in the dynamic ASEAN region. I'm December Paras from EBC Indonesia Bureau, and thank you for watching.
And that's it for today's broadcast. We'll see you back tomorrow, same time, same place, here on ASEAN in Focus. Good day.
Welcome sa isa na namang episode ng Kwentuhan kung saan hindi ako kung hindi kayo
ang bida. Napansin nyo ba na may kakaiba sa ating 1,000 peso bill?
Yung picture ko, magagamit mo rin siya as a way to spread message of conservation for our Philippine eagle.
Napatpad siya sa Maynila hanggang sa makarating siya sa Olongapo.
Manila to Olongapo.